Welcome to At Your Library. I'm your host, Cathleen Clifford. This summer, thanks to a generous donation from our circle of friends, the Groton Public Library will be hosting 2 virtual workshops. They will be hosted by local farm Gable Lee Farm out of Colchester, Connecticut. Joining us today is owner Mark Gostkiewicz.
You got it.
All right, yay. Thank you, Mark, for joining us. I'm not an outdoors person, so I'm going to rely on you to tell us all about what we need to know. Let's start with, how did your farm come about, and what makes it a little more unique than your typical farm?
Yeah, thanks. I think how we got started was my wife and I, we ended up moving to Colchester. My family, my grandparents came from Colchester, and they had lived on the farm, even my great-grandparents as well. And my father, while he was a young man before he started a family, had actually worked on the farm. And my uncle ended up paying him in land.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up getting the land that we lived on, thanks to the hard work of my dad and the generosity of my uncle. And my wife and I, we ended up seeing the land, one day, and when we were thinking about buying a house or whatever, and we were like, oh wow, there's a field here, but where we'd want the house, we have to kind of clear it, and so we ended up clearing the the lot and kind of starting out, as young teachers. My wife's a special ed teacher and I'm a math teacher. We have the summers, and that allowed us to have some time to put into the property. And so growing up, I also worked on an organic farm and a conventional farm, that the nursery, Hart's Greenhouse and Florist, in Colchester, in Canterbury. And putting all that together, we finally had this land to start to do something with. And it kind of started out with me as a teacher. I wanted to do a CSA, which I don't know if you know what that is.
I do.
It's a neat way of starting
Right.
and getting the money up front from your customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had teachers at my school who subscribed to our farm, and we grew veggies from out in the field from April through Christmas. And I brought those veggies into my school, and the teachers ended up buying them.
That's great.
And then I just would flip that money into the next thing on the farm, the next experiment. When we had kids, though, I found that I was spending so much time, just so much time prepping and harvesting and everything, and I was missing time with my kids. My wife was just, stuck with the kids.
Right.
And so we ended up transitioning, and I wanted to get into beekeeping as a hobby. And so we get to the transition of our farm model now is teaching, and it really all started with the first beehive that I built, and geeking out with that. So
Nice.
so I ended up building 3 beehives, but I sold them immediately and got money to then buy bees. And then I built more hives. And so our model right now is a mix of building things. We've moved away from agriculture of growing things. And now it's building things is kind of half of the operation. The other half is my passion of teaching.
And teaching, so it puts both parts of your life together into one.
Yeah.
Because you're known as an agricultural center too.
Yeah. So, and that's our future goal is to kind of move away from building things and just to do teaching. And thanks to doing library programs and teaching at my school, I get to do these lessons over and over and over and perfect them and fine tune them and give resources to the people who leave.
Okay.
I'm basically building my own curriculum,
So one of the things that you're going to be doing for our library is on July 29th, you're going to be doing a workshop on fermented foods.
Yeah.
So for our audience, why should they care about fermented foods? What's so special about them?
In being a teacher, it's one of the cool things is that when we have our little school garden and we harvest the stuff, we are in the fall and winter months, and there's nothing growing. Mm-hmm. But we started doing that doing fermented foods with our kids at school, and it ended up it transforms the food. It ends up making it just vastly different than what it was to begin with. You teach a kid how to make pickles from scratch, and they basically see, oh, you pay attention to a few details, you put it in a jar, And then like in a week or so, it's like they're pickles. They have transformed. I think just that like transformation and the fact that you're cooking, but without heat and anything, you're just using like the natural bacteria and fungi, yeast, or whatever that's in the environment. I think seeing what happens with kids at home, you know, they leave my classroom and then like want to like do that at home. That's like just one of the coolest things. Never mind that the fact that we are around, the fact that we are here is because our ancestors knew how to do this.
Right.
It's how they survived, you know,
Through the
long
long
winters, you know,
right.
in wherever they were in the world. You know, winters or even like hot summer seasons was like ferment things, and it made your food like potable. It made liquids potable and made your food last longer. And so it's tapping into history, but also like in a fun way, like engaging people and sharing in food that you make.
During
Yeah.
your program, what can our viewers expect to learn? Will it just be the history of it? Are you going to demonstrate? Like, what can they
Yeah.
expect to come from our...
It's like a little cooking class. I go out like, you know, a week or so before and I start to plan based on the season, you know, what's available. And the great thing is that we're in farmers market season. So like, you know, whenever
Right.
the lesson is, I'm gonna go to my local farmers market and see like what looks great. And, you know, put it in the fridge, keep it fresh until the lesson. And the only prep that I really do ahead of time is washing and maybe chopping things. But also like chopping and cutting things up, you know, like it's important for people to kind of see, you know,
Right.
how do you prepare it? And so what should people expect is that not a lot of history.
Okay.
It's more of like, we're gonna go through several recipes and talk about the importance of cleanliness, you know, so nobody like poisons themselves, and also identifying pour ferments, you know, like they are very easy to identify.
Okay.
Because you smell it and you're like, oh, and you feel like you're gonna throw up.
Okay,
you know,
great. I'm
and-
glad this will be virtual.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, it's going to be like a little cooking class where some
Okay.
stuff's prepared, but there's going to be repetition. You know, repetition is the key to learning at anything. And so what people are going to see is that in repeating through at least half a dozen ferments, and seeing the process, you'll see, oh wow, like that process is the same in that dish and in the same, you know, with sauerkraut. So if we go into like, what are the typical things? I typically teach how to make sauerkraut and pickles, guaranteed.
Okay.
Usually kimchi, pickled carrots, pickled beets, some sort of pickled roots like that. And then also like pickled eggs. And I'm trying to think of some others, but like it actually does depend on the season. And what you see is repetition in the recipes that help you get a holistic picture of, well, you know, what can I do with the food that I have, and how could I experiment with some things, and what would I expect to see in a recipe, you know?
Speaking of that, so for our viewers, they'll be like, oh, that sounds so complicated. Are there any ingredients that would be hard to find around here in Connecticut?
It really, yeah. With fermenting foods, you're using whatever is locally
So it's
grown.
so much
it could be
easier
what's
than-
in their backyard garden. It could be what's in the grocery store. In the middle of the winter, I'm you know, and I'm teaching these lessons. I'll show the kids like, hey, these cucumbers that we make, we're gonna make pickles from these cucumbers, but these are winter cucumbers. These are gonna be horrible pickles, and so we make them, and the kids are like, oh, these are mushy and blah, and you know, and then when we get kids back in the summer school program, which we don't have right now,
Right.
but like when we have them in the summer school program, they end up finding out that there really is a big difference in using fresh veggies.
Excellent.
Yeah. So
Great. So that virtual program is going to take place on June 29th.
Yep.
I believe it's at 3 p.m.
Okay.
So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the second program that you're doing for us in August.
Thanks.
Can one girl in a small town, an architect in a major city, and a suburban high school coach shape the future of the United States? Yes, they can. Because every 10 years, the census gives us that power. You can shape your future by responding to the 2020 census. Where do we need new roads to make our lives easier? Where will new school programs help our children thrive? Where could a new health clinic benefit neighborhoods? The 2020 census will inform these decisions and shape how billions of dollars will be distributed to communities like yours each year. And in 2020, you can respond to the census online, by phone, or by mail. It's easy, safe, and important. Make sure you and everyone you know is counted. Now is the time for you to get involved. Your community needs you. Together, we can educate and excite, inspire, and make sure every voice is heard. Together, we can shape our future.
Welcome back to At Your Library. Today we're talking with Mark from the farm Gable Leaf Farm in Colchester, and we're talking about the upcoming virtual programs that he's going to be hosting for the library. Welcome back. Did you have a good break?
Oh yeah.
So originally you were supposed to come in and do a workshop for us in April for Earth Day, but with COVID-19, the whole world stopped and we're learning things a different way. So what I'm really curious about is how has this affected your farm and your business?
Yeah. I mean, because our model is teaching and trying to do that in person, and my wife and I are both teachers, we focused first on our jobs. Okay, right. and, you know, our daytime jobs of teaching, and then we've got 2 little kids at home. You know, we got we had a kindergartner and a 3rd grader at home, and so everything farm-wise stopped, but that's okay, you know. But then everybody got chickens while they were home. Everybody got chicks.
I have heard that.
so a big moneymaker this year was on the weekends when I wasn't teaching or anything, was just pounding through and building chicken coops and delivering them.
Okay.
And it was a good model. It was, you know, and also like helping those people with all of their chicken questions. And so you know, there was a library that had us try a Zoom class, and you know, like this, and so they set it up, and I got a chance to try that. And after I tried that, I was like, oh wow, this might be a better way of like me reaching my students, you know, who are in, you know, in 8th grade math. And so I tried it there, and then when I got really comfortable teaching my kids with some of that, I then transitioned our house programs. Instead of like closing down and being like, all right, all the classes we had scheduled in May, we can't do. I emailed everybody and I said, hey, we're gonna do it by Zoom. You can tune in live or you can watch the recording. And it's something that I actually had always wanted to do, because then I can reach people around the world.
Right.
And there was like somebody from like the UK, somebody from Kentucky, somebody from Oregon, who like tuned into those lessons. Never mind people from Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, which are our typical customer base of people who want these lessons.
Right,
so,
who would normally drive down.
So we did like a no-till gardening class, a chicken keeping class, which was popular because everybody was getting chickens. And so you know, and the beekeeping and mushroom growing, those are big popular ones. And I did a kombucha class. And now all of those are recorded, and I actually I'm making a little bit of money here and there as people are purchasing those recordings.
Nice.
So it's been different. I've been watching as I still get the emails from the state Department of Agriculture, and it's been interesting to see what producers have to do and how it's different.
Okay.
I mean, you know how we're in grocery stores and how they have to set up farmers markets differently, and how they have to prepare and handle foods differently. Yeah, I really feel for all those people who still are growing. Our model is just different, you know. So we hit the pause button, but now we're still kind of going.
Great. Yeah. Well, you're going to do the second program in August is going to be about beekeeping.
Yeah.
So my first question is, why should people keep bees?
There really are like more bee colonies, you know, than ever, because there's so many like people keeping bees.
Okay.
You know, the backyard beekeeper. in the whole scheme of things, though, their bees may not survive versus the commercial people, because the commercial people really, like, they're invested in it. And when their bees die, they know how to repopulate their colonies from the survivors.
Okay.
I think like one of the reasons why people should keep bees or shouldn't keep bees. When I teach this class, I think it's so that people realize how much work there really is involved, and how big of an investment it is. For some people, you really should leave it to the professionals. And for others who do have the ability to jump in and actually make a sustainable operation with multiple hives, that's what it's going to take. I think it then creates, something that is more sustainable. Okay. So I think by reaching out to people, the more people who end up trying to keep bees, you're going to end up with more people who end up figuring it out.
Oh, okay. The percentages go up.
And so, I mean, a good part of our crops do depend on bees to be out there to pollinate them. If anything, for our own survival.
Right, and we hear
sense.
about that in the news all the time, you know, that we're losing our bees, the bees are dying.
Yeah.
So if you come to our virtual program on August 5th, what can people expect to learn?
Yeah, it ends up being about like 2 hours of, a flow state of mind conversation, where people can ask questions and everything along the way, but there's so many things that are jam-packed in there. About the first hour is just the bee biology, and letting people kind of know, like, changing their mindset about bees, so that you're thinking about how the queen is not necessarily the boss of the hive. She is the ovaries of the hive, and so we end up learning about that. So another thing that people will end up learning that changes their mindset is just the way that bees make their decision, and that it's like is that it's a collective mindset. Just like how your mind, when you're thinking about doing something, you're weighing pros and cons, you're making all these judgments. As a whole, the colony is ending up making decisions together. Okay. And it's like a hive mind. It really is. Like, you might think out of like sci-fi and stuff like that, with like, the hive mind or whatever is
right.
like the evil, the evil in the world. But really the way they end up making decisions is collectively. Okay. And so the first hour is about that bee biology and reframing the way people think. And then we do about a half an hour of like, how do you get bees? And what are you going to need?
Mail order? Do you call up?
Exactly.
What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. How do you source bees? And that connects back to the biology, because we'll go through all the pros and cons, and when you connect the biology to the different ways you can source bees, you really get a chance to know the pros and cons of different ways you can get bees. And then the final part is actually going over hives, different hive styles and equipment, and not steering anybody towards one type of hive or another, but giving them the menu of options to choose from and letting them make the choice. We'll talk about how like 90% of people end up choosing, a conventional style hive, and why. And then why somebody might consider other hive types, but also the pros and cons of those. And so people should end up leaving knowing all of the different things that they might have to take into consideration before buying equipment, before investing, nearly or $1,000 or more just to get set up. Because it's, so that's what people end up,
So after our patrons attend your workshop, yep. We have Fermented Foods in July and Beekeeping in August. I know they're going to have more questions. So do you normally present a resource list for them on how to get more details on a certain subject they're interested in?
Yeah. With the Fermented Foods, there's no presentation, no slideshow that goes along with it, because It's really demonstration. With the beekeeping one, there is a PowerPoint that goes along with it, and I'll be sending you those links. Okay. You can like post them, whatever. There's also a handout that typically goes with each one, and it's either with the Fermented Foods one, there'll be a handout that bullets the things that we went through. It's going to have live links in it. It's a Google Doc. Oh. So it's
recipes.
Recipes and stuff. So if I had mentioned something, if even somebody like contacts me and say, hey, what was that thing you mentioned? And it's not in the presentation, since it's a Google Doc, I go in, I edit it, I put the live link in or the description, and whenever anybody checks it out, a week from now, a month from now, 2 years from now, as long as the document's still there, it's going to be updated.
Great.
And so they'll not only be able to like you know, ask their questions. They can even comment in it, because that's what a Google Doc allows you to do, is to comment on it. And so yeah, it's going to have all of those like takeaway resources. If this was a set of handouts to print out, they could print it out, but it's going to be more helpful because it has links in it. And the beekeeping one, yeah, it's got tons and tons of links for further, you know, I'm going to totally like hold up books in the beekeeping one and be like, this is the book for you if you're thinking about becoming this type of beekeeper or using this type of hive. And you don't have to remember any of it. All of those links are like, they're in the takeaways.
Great. So any of our patrons that are feeling a little overwhelmed and are thinking, oh, this is too much for me, we really encourage you to sign up and join in on these, because even if you learn a little something new, it might take you to a whole new topic. So that's great. I cannot thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we are looking forward to our presentations. Going to let people know that they can register by calling the Groton Public Library. Fermented Foods will be on June 29th, and Beekeeping will be on August 5th. And this has been Mark from Gable Leaf Farms. And as always, this has been At Your Library. Thanks for checking in.